Welcome to Lauren's House COVID Mental Wellness Check-In. I'm Monique Grades, and today we will be discussing communication. What did you say? Communication. That's right, communication. Today's presenter is none other than Renaldo Moodie, LMFT. He has over 10 years experience counseling individuals that suffer from depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and suicidal ideation, just to name a few. He prides himself with the work he's done with family dynamics, dysfunctional communication styles, and addictions within family systems. Renaldo is currently finishing up his doctoral degree in clinical psychology. And the next voice you will be hearing from is Renaldo Moodie. Please, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please list them in the box, and we look forward to seeing you at the end. Have a wonderful day.
So my name is Renaldo Moodie. I'm a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist. I've been doing this for about going on 15 years. My background is in family dynamics, substance abuse, and severe mental disorders. That's my background. I worked with families that were struggling with gender identities, families that had conflict resolution problems, and individuals who were schizophrenic, depressed, and bipolar. That's a little bit about me. I am 46 years old. I went to Oakwood University, and I graduated from North Central University in Arizona with my master's in marriage and family therapy. And then I recently became licensed as a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I am currently in my doctoral program. In another year and a half, I will be done with my doctoral degree in clinical psychology, and I will be pursuing licensure at the doctoral level after I graduate. So that's a little bit about me. So as of Thursday, I passed my test to be a licensed marriage and family therapist. So that's really exciting for me. It's been a long journey. And in this journey, I would like to share some of that information with you about communication. Now, so one of the biggest things about communication I want you to take away from this conversation is that your relationship with your child is everything. It has to be paramount when it comes to having good communication with your kids. And in order to have good communication with your kids, good relationship with your kids, the communication piece has to be there. The relationship parents have to protect. We have to protect the relationship with our kids above all costs. And I know some people are like, wait a minute. That is not how I grew up. Well, believe me, that's not how I grew up either. Both my parents are West Indian. Migrated to Panama. So they definitely had some ideas about parenting where it was extremely authoritative. Extremely authoritative. They had to share and impose their beliefs. That was how it was done back in the day when we were kids. Our parents imposed their belief systems on us, and we literally had no choice. So let's get into communication. I know that's what you came for, so let me give it to you. In order to communicate effectively with our kids, the relationship piece has to be there. There is no communication without relationships. And nowadays, parents, we don't have a luxury of always being so authoritative with our kids. Of course, to a certain degree, there's going to be some authoritative nature in how we parent. But how we were parented before, that idea is out the window. Some parents may do it successfully, but for the majority of us, the authoritative dictatorship type of parenting, we're not going to be able to do that successfully. Why? Because of information. Information is key. And the kids get it right. And the parents are not doing it right. The kids are gathering all kinds of information from everywhere. And we as parents, we stay in our bubble. And we neglect to tap into the resources that would help us in regards to parenting. We have to tap into those parental resources that will help us be better parents. Information is key, and the kids know that. They get all kinds of information from everywhere. TikTok, the street, YouTube. They are gathering all kinds of information, and they're realizing that there's a different way of functioning. And it may not be in line with our parenting style. So the question is, how do we deal with that as parents? Because we're approaching our parental duties in a very archaic fashion. We have to evolve. It is time for us to evolve so that we can become better parents, and we could help our kids, guide them just a little bit better than what has been we currently have been doing here at least in the US. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about a belief system. We first have to figure out a belief system that is a jumping off point so that our kids have an idea of what to expect from us. And that belief system can be cultural, religious, communal. It could be any type of belief system you want. But our kids, they need to know what we are thinking, why. They need to understand that we're just not saying things from out the blue, or we're not just telling them yes or no just because we can. When we approach our parental duties from a belief system, whether it be religious or cultural, what happens is that when they come to us, they have a frame of reference, and that is key. Having a frame of reference of where we're coming from when we communicate with our kids. Now look, my goal is not to tell you or teach you in 45 minutes what to say to your kids, what not to say to your kids. That is not the goal. My goal is to drop a little seed in your mind, just a little one, about how we can communicate just a little differently. And if we want to talk about different strategies in communication, we can. But in these 45 minutes, I want us to explore a belief system that involves relationship and communication, and how they go hand in hand and they marry each other. So for instance, let's say your son gets into a fight at school. And what happens is that one kid was talking to another one, your son was talking to another kid, and the kid started talking to your son, and the conversation escalates. You know how kids are, they escalate, and they start saying things that they shouldn't say, and all of a sudden everyone starts posturing, bumping on the chest, and they're all in each other's face. And now they start to push it. And then all of a sudden your son throws the first punch. How do you handle it? What do you focus on? What do you focus on? Well, you could focus on the fact that your kid threw the first punch. You could focus on the fact that your kid was maybe saying things that he shouldn't have said. You could focus on the idea that your kid didn't walk away from the fight. What do you focus on? Well, let me share with you. How many people, adults, do you see actually fighting in the streets nowadays? You don't see all kinds of adults fighting in the streets nowadays. Why is that? Is it because they had good parents to teach them not to fight? No, it's not because of that. It's because some things kids just naturally grow out of. Kids just naturally grow out of some things. They naturally grow out of chewing with their mouth open, or they pass the gas in the middle of the street. How many adults do you just know that's sitting around passing gas in public places? Well, they don't do that because it's socially unacceptable. Guidance by your parent, along with things that are socially unacceptable, kids naturally just grow out of certain things. So is it really a good idea to get on kids for every little thing? Nah, it doesn't really make sense. To me, and this is from my personal opinion, I wouldn't focus on the fight, because for whatever reason they're going to believe that fight was justified. I'm going to focus on the fact that they may have been using foul language. That's the first thing I'm going to ask. Did you use foul language? Did you say anything derogatory? What did you say that was inflammatory? That's what I want to focus on. Why? Because there are more adults that will use foul language inappropriately and in public spaces than they would get into fights. So when I talk to my son, he's going to already know my dad's going to talk to me about my language. What did I say or what didn't I say? My son is already going to know that my key phrase is, did you master the English language? Did you master it? How did you use the English language to help you in this situation? Not to fight. The reality is, if we focus on language, 99% of the time, the fight may never occur. How did you de-escalate? What words did you use? That is the dialogue and the communication that keeps that relationship open, because we're not talking about who did what and why this person did this or why our kids did that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being able to communicate what you have been trying to teach your kids all along, whether it be don't cuss, whether it be respect, whatever it may be. Keeping those lines of communication open for dialogue that is anchored in a belief system is what's going to continue to nurture the relationship between you and your children, which keeps the lines of communication open. Now, how you communicate with your kids, everyone communicates with their kids differently. Some people, I know some parents who would sit with their kids, they always sit in the same spot and they talk to their kids. Some people go for walks and they talk to their kids. Someone came up with a question, I'm reading it right now. But if there is an abuse against kids from teacher, classmates, how the English language can help them resist their offender? Good question. There are certain there are certain caveats to mastering the English language. And this is no exception. This is no exception. For instance, earlier this year, earlier in the week, I saw on the news how a teacher spanked this kid. Did you guys see that? Did you guys see that in the news? Where a principal, wasn't a teacher, it was a principal that was spanking this kid, and the mother was sitting in the room watching. Did anyone see that on the news? It was in Florida. It happened in Florida. And the kid, of course, was very apologetic, and he was crying and went on. The goal is they may never be able to fend off a situation like that. There's not enough talking that's going to make that stop or not happen. But the goal is that they feel comfortable saying it to you. Which brings me to my next point. And this is extremely important when it comes to communicating with our kids. It is not about the outcome. It is the process of communication. Not the outcome, the process. Because when things happen to our kids, we don't want them going into the street to figure out how to resolve it. We don't want them looking on YouTube to figure out how to resolve it. You want them to come to you. You want them to come to the parent, because in the parental system is where the relationship is developed. You don't want that relationship to develop on the street. You don't want them developing a relationship on the street or on YouTube. You want them developing that relationship with you. Here's the reality. You could focus on 5 or 6 years of control with your kids. Or you could focus on 30 to 50 years of influencing generations with your kids and your grandkids. I'm gonna say that again. The authoritative approach that our parents took with us, some may say it worked absolutely well. Others may have a difference of opinion. But in today's generation, it'll be a lot more difficult to maintain that relationship, which cultivates the communication with our kids. I'm sorry, I was reading what she was saying. And I'm going to get to that. I saw that question. I'm going to get to that. It'll be a lot more difficult when dealing with our kids, having that authoritative manner. I want my son, me personally, I want my son, when he's 30 and 40 and 50 years old, I want him to come to me and ask me, hey, Dad, I'm about to get married. What do you think? Dad, my son is doing this. I don't know how to handle it. Dad, you know what? I'm about to make this investment. Do you think it's a good idea? That is what I want 30 or 40 years from now. I want to be in the end game. I want to be in the game when my kids are making decisions. But there's no being in the game if you want control over 5 or 6 years of their life. You're out the game. Because at some point, when they're 18, they're going to make a choice whether to come to you or not. That is why the outcome is not as important as the process. So let me give you an example. And this goes with any relationship. A friend, a significant other, this is with any relationship you're in. Where we focus on the outcome, getting what we want. You may get what you want, but the process would prevent you from having that relationship and those open communications with your kids moving forward. Let me give an example. So let's go back to the fighting situation. So your son gets into a fight. And when he comes to you and says, Mom, Dad, I got into it. I hit first. You know what? I didn't have a choice. And the first thing you do is you flip out. You get upset because you told him you do not get into fights at school. It'll ruin your opportunity to get a good education. You're going to get suspended. It's going on your record. You go all in on your son because you keep going over and over and you keep telling them you do not behave like this at school. What have you done? What have you done? Essentially, what you've done is made it unsafe for him to come talk to you. It's not safe anymore. So he may never have another fight at school. But when he's thinking about having sex with a girl, or when he's thinking about going to a party he shouldn't, or when he's thinking about using drugs or smoking a cigarette, when he wants to talk about those behaviors that his friends are doing, that he's contemplating in his mind, he's not coming to you. Because when he came to you about the fight, you made it unsafe. We want to create an environment where it's safe for our kids to come talk to us, which means sometimes they may be doing things or they may come to us about situations that we may not approve of, but sometimes that may require us to hold our tongue and not react, to stay calm. Sometimes we may not even give our opinion. I know that's so hard for some parents, but sometimes that may be what is required in order to cultivate the relationship so that we create an environment so that we can communicate. And again, this is not about telling everyone what to do. This is not about telling people what to do. My goal is to help put in your mind, and I'm going to keep repeating it over and over and over again, a process to how to communicate. Because the truth is that we want to continually learn different strategies that fit our personality and our way of life, our cultural beliefs. We want to figure those out and use communication within the realm of those boundaries. That is what we want. Everyone's going to be different. How you do it is all going to be different, but the idea is that we first protect the relationship so that now we invest in communicating effectively with our kids so that when they are 50 years old, we are still in the game influencing generation. Not that we had control over 5 or 6 years. That's not what we want. To no longer have an influence over our kids as adults, but we made sure that they did exactly what we wanted them to do while they were teenagers. That's not the goal. So what do? We talk to different professionals. We talk to different therapists, psychologists. We talk to educators, and there are different types of educators. We talk to lawyers. Even lawyers are important. Like, for instance, that lady, that principal that got in trouble for spanking that kid in Florida this week. It's corporal punishment, and I didn't even know this, but corporal punishment is actually legal in Florida. It's actually legal in most of the states in the middle of the country. California, New York, Texas, it's not legal. But in some states in the middle of the country, corporal punishment in schools are actually legal. And that principal, it just so happened that in that county that principal was in, it just wasn't legal. And she got caught. I didn't even know that. And that is why we need to continue to talk to different people, different professions. We need to gather our information. Our way of parenting is so archaic. And we stay in our little bubble, but it's time to get out of that little bubble and have some very hard conversations with like-minded people, people who believe the same things you do, people with the same similar values, pastors, rabbis, doctors. We need to gather as much information so that we have options. And that's the key, having options when dealing with our kids and how we communicate with our kids. So for instance, it is important, back to what I was saying, because I'm going to keep repeating myself, back to what I was saying. The outcome is not as important as the process. We focus on the process. So when your kid comes to you and says, "Hey, look, mom, dad, I got into a fight at school, and it's totally unavoidable." We look at our son and we say, "Okay, I see what you're saying. I don't like it, but is there a way we can handle it differently?" Nope, couldn't handle it differently. Nope. And they're just adamant about, "Hey, can't do it." As parents, we have to make sure that we are ready with the appropriate resources to say, "All right, well, even though you did what you had to do in the moment, next time around, what are our options?" When we have those kind of conversations with our kids, what it says to them is, it says, "Okay, I can talk to my mom and I can talk to my dad. It's safe to have an opinion." Because maybe they're just doing what they saw on TV. Maybe they're just doing what they heard in the street. And they're trying to incorporate in their own belief system. But now there are consequences for believing the street. There are consequences for believing YouTube. And now they're coming to you. Are you going to make it unsafe? No. You're not going to make it unsafe. You're going to cultivate the safest environment you can. Doesn't mean that the conversation is going to be easy. It just means the conversation is going to be safe. So the next time they're dealing with anything, even abuse, they feel safe coming to you. I'm going to read this question right now. It says, and can you give a tip, please? If the teacher invites the parents to the school and starts telling how bad the kid is in his student / discipline, how should parents behave, protect their child? Good question. Good question. And that's the key. Kids should always feel protected, but they should also have boundaries, because boundaries create a safe space for the dialogue. Boundaries always create a safe space for the dialogue, because boundaries makes kids curious. Yes, boundaries makes kids curious. So in this example that Alexandria is given, and thank you for the question. When you have a parent when you have a teacher who's saying, "Look, your kid did this," and they're just going all in on your kid. The goal isn't to give back the energy that teacher is giving you. No, that's not the goal. The goal is to model what effective communication is like for your child. That's what you want. You want to model something different. So in a situation like that, you may say something like, "I don't know how productive this conversation is. I don't know how this is helping my son explore his options. Can you help me understand how what you're saying, or what the negative words that you're saying with my child or about my child is helping him to create options in this scenario so that this just doesn't happen again? People start backpedaling. They start backpedaling. They won't expect that. But when you model that behavior that you have been talking to your son about in the home, and you implement that behavior outside the home, they're going to get it. And they're going to feel protected. You may say, you know what? I don't know if you're in the frame of mind to help my son right now. Maybe we should have this meeting at another time and with someone else in the room. You may say that. Immediately, your child would know that you're in total control of the situation. Now, it doesn't mean that you condone his behavior or your son or daughter's behavior. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you believe that what they did was right in the classroom. What you're showing your son or your daughter is that it is important to communicate in a healthy manner. That's what you're showing your son or your daughter. And you're creating a safe space for them to believe that you're invested in the relationship so that they can communicate. Did that answer your question? Hopefully that answered your question. Because when we focus on the relationship, at some point, clear boundaries will be established. And like I said before, those boundaries, they're going to help draw a type of curiosity for your child. Because they're already going to know, you know what, if I go to my mom or my dad and I say, hey, look, let's just go back to the school fighting situation. They come home and say, you know, I want to fight this kid, but my dad and my mom's not going to accept that. But you know what? My dad and my mom, they always said to protect myself. Let me go talk to my mom and my dad. That's what you want. Because you already created the boundaries. Yes, you've already created the boundaries. How they work within those boundaries, you want them to be curious about. You want them to think about that so that they come to you. And that is the key. You have already focused. You're not focused on the outcome. You're focused on the process. You've already made the process safe. And you created boundaries so that they can work within, right, what you've already established. So now they're coming to you to have the conversation. And as long as you make that conversation safe, and as long as you focus on the process of communication and not just getting what you want, you will cultivate an environment for the relationship and the communication. If someone attacks them, if someone abuses them, they will feel safe. That is the goal. We're not yelling, we're not screaming, we're not making the situation unsafe for our kids. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have hard conversations. We will have hard conversations. But the process is not going to make our kids unsafe. They should feel safe coming to us as parents and having those difficult conversations. That way we take power back from YouTube, or we take power back from the streets. We take our power back so that now we influence a generation and not just control 5 or 6 years. I have another question. Let me read it real quick. And how to set boundaries to the kid in a healthy way. I know a lot of people who firstly promise some punishment to the kid after his bad behavior, and then parents cannot maintain those restrictions. Thus, the kid loses respect to the parents. Good question. Let me read it one more time. I know a lot of people who firstly promise some punishment to the kid after his bad behavior, and then parents cannot maintain these restrictions. Thus, the kid loses respect to the parents. So, all right, this is a good question. We mistake boundaries for punishment. Boundaries is a higher form of communication. It is. It is a higher level of communicating what our needs and our wants are and what our expectations are. Most people look at boundaries in a very one-way direction. Well, if you do this, then this is going to be the consequences. Yeah, you could look at boundaries that way, but that's not boundaries was really. That's not what boundaries really was for. Boundaries is a higher level of communicating what you expect. And I'm going to take it a step further. When you have intimate relationships, boundaries is really a way of communicating how you love best by setting good boundaries. Let me give you an example with kids. So here we go. When you have a kid, let's look at. I'm gonna give you a personal example. Jewelry. I don't wear jewelry. I don't wear a wedding ring, but I've been married for almost 18 years. But I don't wear jewelry. And quite frankly, I don't want my kids wearing jewelry until they're of age to buy it for themselves. But a lot of kids nowadays wear jewelry. So my kids come to me and say, my oldest kid, he's 14, he comes to me and says, Dad, I want to have this gold chain. I want to buy this gold chain. The boundaries say, well, some people say, look at boundaries, say, you know what, you can't wear any jewelry, and if you do, then here are the consequences. That's one way of looking at boundaries. Another way to look at boundaries is communicating a standard. I'm gonna say it one more time. Communicating a standard in a way of life and what you expect out of the relationship is another way of communicating a higher form of boundaries. So my son comes to me and he says, I want to wear jewelry. I'm like, all right, so why? Why is such an interest in wearing jewelry? Now, it doesn't mean that I'm going to change my answer. I may not ever change my answer. It may always be no, but again, it's the process. And maybe, I don't know, but maybe in the process of discussing these options with my son, maybe I may learn something about myself. Maybe I may learn a middle ground that we can both agree on. I may not like it. I may not totally agree with it, but maybe it's something I can live with because I'm willing to help him explore his belief systems a little better. Does that make sense? So when I'm setting boundaries, I'm not saying, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. If this happens, then these are the consequences. No. I mean, you could, but that's not what I'm doing because I'm trying to communicate on a totally different level. I'm trying to communicate, hey, let's explore our options and let's see what works best for us both. Right now, in my head, I can't imagine you wearing jewelry. You already know that because I already set those boundaries. But just because I've set these boundaries, I am not so unflexible that I can't have a conversation. Because at the end of the day, that's what I want. I want a conversation. I want to talk about why you want to do this. What is inspiring it? Is there something else that we can do that could fulfill the same goal other than wearing the jewelry? That is what I want. Because the more I do that, the more conversations I'm going to have with my kids. The more I just leave the answer closed-ended and say no, the less conversations I'm going to have with my kids. Did that answer your question? Because now you're asking about kids losing respect. There's no losing respect with that. It takes definitely a lot more work. Definitely a lot more work. You're going to have to sometimes, and I do this all the time, sometimes I say, let me think about it and let me come back to you. It doesn't mean I need to think about what my answer is going to be. Nah, my answer is still going to be the same, depending on what it is. Because he may say something that may trigger a different thought process. And we may come up with a compromise we both may be able to live with. But for the most part, I'm going to say, let me get back to you on that. Let me think about it, because I'm more invested in the process. And if you don't hear anything else I'm saying, please remember that the process is more important than the outcome. Because the relationship is paramount for healthy communication. We just don't want power over those 5 or 6 years. We want influence over generations. And that's going to require parents to be a lot more patient. Approach communication and parenting and discipline in a totally different way than we ever experienced with our own parents. And again, in these 45 minutes that I've pretty much already used up, the goal isn't to tell you how to talk to your kids differently. You are going to learn that by building a better resource bank with families that you're familiar with, that have similar value systems, other professionals, therapists, parent groups. You're going to gather all that information. You're going to bring it together, and you're going to figure out what works, what style works for you. Now, I am open. I am totally open to giving strategies. Believe me, that's what I do. We can explore different strategies that work for your family. It's unique for you. I know what works, and that's what's unique for me. But what's unique for me, the communication style that's unique for me, that works for me, may not be a communication style that is unique for you and that works for you. The goal is to drop that seed in your mind that, one, we always put the relationship first. That's the most important part. One, we put the relationship first. Two, with a healthy relationship comes good communication, right? Three, when we focus on the process, when we focus on the process, we create an environment, we cultivate an environment that is safe for our kids to want to communicate with us. So that now we can have a dialogue. When we focus on the outcome, we cut off communication. They may never do whatever it is they did that one time. But the rest of the time, when they're thinking about doing things that we do not want them to participate in, we've cut ourselves off from that conversation because we are more invested in the outcomes of behavior instead of the process, and making the process of them coming in and talking to us safe. I would like to end with this. Please We have to tool ourselves with information, just like these kids are tooling themselves with information. They're gathering information from each and everywhere they possibly can. Parents, we need to do the same from appropriate resources. We're smarter than our kids. Yes, we are. We tool ourselves with appropriate information so that we can take that power back from the streets. We can take that power back from YouTube, TikTok. We take that power back so that we don't put too much emphasis on those 5 or 6 years they are teenagers. We put our emphasis in influencing a generation. They may make mistakes that we wish they never had. And some of those mistakes we're going to have to let them own. Yeah, that's the hard part of being a parent. But at least you're in the game when they're adults. You're in the game when they're making them hard decisions about their kids. You're in the game when they're making those decisions about who they're going to marry. That's where you want to be. You want to be in the game when they're 30 and 40 years old. You don't want to be out of it. But by focusing on making sure they don't do certain behaviors, by focusing on the outcome, you cut yourself off from being in the game 20 or 30 years later. We got to make the process safe so that they continue to come back to us. We want them to continue to come back to us. Doesn't mean the conversations are always going to be easy. It doesn't mean that they're going to get what they want. It just means that they feel safe coming to us and having a conversation. And that's the important piece. I got another question here. Can you recommend good books/resources about parenting and healthy communications with kids? Your favorite ones? Oh, yes. One that I've used frequently, and it's not specifically about kids, is it's geared really towards young boys, and it's more about boundary setting, which again is a higher form of communication. And the book is called No More Excuses by last name Evans. I can't remember the first name, but if you give me your information or email address, I can email it to you. And I can email you some different resources about parenting that I have used as well. Any other questions? I love talking about communication. I love talking about parenting styles. I love talking about options to create some energy around drawing our kids in and creating that relationship so we can cultivate a sense of a good, healthy way of communicating. Because that's the key. You gotta have the relationship if you want to be in the end game. That's just truth. If kids don't feel safe when they're young, they're not going to feel safe when they're older. So we have to cultivate that space. We have to create that space so that our kids continue to come to us when they have questions or concerns or when they're scared. We got to create that safe space so that we can communicate. Any other comments?
What happens when you don't feel heard?
Ooh, I barely understood that. I understood something about being heard, but that's all I understood. There was a huge echo. And I see another question here. Where can I find your email to write you with the requests of resources and books. Oh, I can put it right here. Let me know. I don't know if I can make a comment here, but I'm gonna try. Tell me if you see this comment. I just posted my email address. Do you see that? Okay. I got a question here. It says, what happens when you are communicating but you don't feel heard? Okay. I can answer this two ways. Yep, there goes my email address. That's my personal email address. So you could if you email me there, then I will definitely get it. All right, so I have a question here that says, what happens when you are communicating but you don't feel heard? I can answer this two ways. There's a difference between the parents being heard and kids being heard. Which one you want to talk about? Which one is the question? Both. Okay. All right. So let's start with the parent. When a parent is trying to communicate with their kids and they feel like they're not being heard, the reality is that they may not be ready to hear you. And that's just something we have to accept. But it's all about perseverance when it comes to parenting, right? It's all about perseverance. You may have to say the same thing 100 times. For over 2 years, I've been trying to teach my kids to pick their clothes up off the floor. It is just how they process information. The question is that the hill I really want to die on? Or do I want to put more emphasis on the fact that my kid may not be getting the grades I want him to get? Right? Where do I want to put my energy? What hill am I really going to die on? Even if you don't think they hear you, it is our job to model good communication and patience to make sure the space is safe. So it's going to be uncomfortable. There are some things that are non-negotiable, but everything can't be non-negotiable. And I know this is not what parents want to hear, but the reality is you're going to have to choose when to bring the hammer down and say, you listen to what I say and you do it now. And for other situations, you're going to have to say, this is just something I'm just going to keep talking to him about over and over and over again. There's just some things you're just going to have to accept. I know that's not the answer you wanted to hear, but that is just the reality when it comes to parenting. You may feel you're not being heard, and you're going to have to attack it at different angles. Maybe say, you know what? I want you to ask that same question to Auntie Tiffany or Uncle Ralph. See what they say. Tell me what they say. I want you to ask that same question to the pastor. See if what I'm telling you is any different than what they're doing. You're going to have to attack it at all different angles. But the key is, just because our kids aren't doing exactly what we tell them, when we tell them all the time, it's not a reflection on you personally as a parent. It just means that they're being a kid. And that's all it is. They're just being kids. Now, what happens when a kid doesn't feel heard? That is dangerous. When a kid does not feel heard, it is a very dangerous space to be in. Because as adults, if we're not feeling heard, we can still find a sense of safety. But when a kid is not feeling heard, they may feel unsafe. So we always have to check in with our children. Do you understand why we're doing this? Does it bother you that we're doing this? Or we're approaching this situation this way? Does that bother you? Why does it bother you? Tell me what you think I'm trying to say. These are the questions we use to make sure our kids feel heard in the process of setting boundaries when it comes to the parental structure. Because our kids need to feel heard. But feeling heard doesn't mean we do what they want us to do, or they do what they want to do. That's not what feeling heard is about. Feeling heard is letting our kids know we're listening. We may not agree, but we're listening. Can we explore some options that is healthy for us both? Some options, there's just a non-negotiable, but everything can't be a non-negotiable. There are some things that are negotiable. All right, let's explore what those things are. That way you feel heard. And then they get buy-in, right? They get buy-in. So that now they have to communicate their thoughts if they really want whatever it is they want. Did that answer your question? I'm hoping it was clear.
Wow, Renaldo, that was very inspirational and informative on what parents can do and where our mindset should be. We want to build relationships with our kids that are lasting. I totally appreciate you for stopping by. Thank you everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next week. See you later.